Alright, so for this video, we're going to be doing Simon Leviev, the Tinder Swindler, and we're going to see what his rating is and how attractive he really is. Alright, so his overall facial rating is a 4.9. How rare is that? That's 1 in 1.94 people, and the percentage of that is the top 50 percentile. His side facial score is a 52%. His front facial score is an 18%. His total facial harmony is a 31%. His facial dimorphism is a 5.5. So how masculinized is his face? His body fat factors is a 5. His miscellaneous features is a 9. Tier list is to the right side. Tier 1 is ideal. Tier 2 near ideal. Tier 3 normal. Tier 4 slight flaw. Tier 5 is a flaw. Tier 6 is a huge flaw. And Tier 7 breaks harmony. Alright, so this is his overall facial assessment breakdown, the things that I feel like are the biggest flaws in his face. So we're going to go over it real quick. In the side view profile, the maxilla has a lot of forward protrusion. Consequently, it can affect all the facial convexity measurements. This can lead to a mid-face that is too forwardly grown. In the front view profile, his frontal jaw angle is more on the steeper side. And the mid-face angle, which is the ipsilateral alier angle, is on the wider side. This will create a disharmony between the jaw and the mid-face angle. If both angles deviate past 15 degrees, it will be considered a flaw. These are the rarity scores of other celebrities, so y'all can compare. Facial dimorphism is worth 20% of the overall facial assessment, and for males he scored a 5.5 like I said before. And eye aspect ratio, he gets a check for that. Dominant lower third, he gets a check for that. Browish inclination, he gets a check. Gonial angle, check. Nasal protrusion, he got a check for that one. And nasal frontal angle, he got a check. And if you don't know some of these, you're going to figure out real soon later down in the video. Alright, so the body fat factors. Now, before, I would say his body fat factors was probably around like a 6, maybe a 6.5. Now, if you like check on his Instagram, he did gain a little bit of weight in his face, and his body fat factors is more closer to like a 5 or maybe a 5.5. So he did lose a little bit of points for that. So his body fat factors is a little bit more. So he does carry a little bit more weight in his face now. His miscellaneous features is worth 15%. And the only flaw I can see is a nasal labial fold. So he does have a nasal labial fold in his face. But anything besides that, his skin quality, everything's pretty much good. So yeah, he doesn't really lose much points for that. So the first measurement is eye separation ratio. His eye separation ratio is a 45.2. That is perfect. So he doesn't lose any points for that. His facial thirds is a tier 4. And the reason why it's a tier 4 is his lower third is just a little bit too long. So it should be around 33% even between all thirds. But if your third is 3% higher than 33%, you'll lose some points for that. So that's why he lost some points for this one. So it is a slight flaw. His canthal tilt is a tier 6. He does have a negative canthal tilt. Negative canthal tilt will make your face appear sad, and it's just droopy. You don't want droopy eyes. His facial width to height ratio, FWHR. So you want your FWH, or you want your features in your face to be more on the compact side. You don't want it to be too elongated or too compact. You want it to be in the middle. So you want your facial features to be balanced well. His is 1.88, and that is very close to the ideal range. So technically, this is not a flaw. His jaw frontal angle is a tier 3 at 80 degrees. 80 degrees isn't too bad. It's really close to the ideal range. If he got around 84 degrees, that would have been ideal. But it's not because his jaw is steep or anything like that. It's just because his jaw is not wide enough, or his bigonial width isn't wide enough as it should be relative to the cheekbones. Maybe, but there's other things that factor into it as well. His cheekbone height How high set is your cheekbones relative to your mid-face? And his is at 63%. 63% is very low. So having low set cheekbones is not desirable for any person, and this is going to be a flaw. So yeah, you do want to have high set cheekbones. Makes your face look youthful and aesthetic. His total facial height to width ratio, so how long is his face, and it is at 1.44. This is a little bit on the longer side. This is not technically a flaw. This is kind of normal, within the normal range, but you want a face that is a little bit more shorter than this. So his face is a little bit on the taller side. His bigonial width is at 91%, so he does have a wide enough jaw relative to the width of his face. Now, like I said again, his jaw and frontal angle is a little bit on the steeper side. Like I said again, maybe that is due to some other things as well, but still, if he did have a little bit wider of a jaw, maybe his jaw frontal angle would be a little bit more wider, but it's due to a multitude of things for that. But his bigonial width is still good, so it doesn't really matter. His chin to field trim ratio is a tier 5 at 3.16. He has an extremely long chin, so this is gonna be a complete disharmony. So yeah. His neck width is 82%, and 82% is not bad, but you want it to be at least 90%, especially for a male. It's more masculinizing, and yeah, it just looks better. Mouth to nose width ratio is a 1.57, and a 1.57 means that his nose is a little bit too small. So if he did have a wider nose, and this is very close to the ideal range. I think the highest for the ideal range for a man is 1.53 or 4. I think it's 1.53. If he did get 1.53, this would have been perfectly fine, but his nose is a little bit on the smaller side. His mid-face ratio is fine at a 1, is literally 1, so that means that he has a perfect mid-face ratio, and his mid-face ratio is perfect. So yeah. His eyebrow settiness, so how high set is your eyebrows? His is at 1.42. 1.42 is still within the normal range, but preferably you want your eyebrows to be lower set, especially for a man. It makes it look more masculinizing. His eye spacing, one eye test. You want your eyes to be at least one width eyes apart. His is more than one width eyes apart at 1.13. This is still normal within reason, but you do want to have your eyes a little bit more closer set to each other, and it just makes it look better. So, and it just balances out the face even more. So yeah. His eye aspect ratio, his is 2.85, or you can consider it as 2.8, or even if it's up to 2.9, it still would be within the ideal range. So his eye is not too narrow or too rounded. This is perfectly fine for a male face. Lower lip to upper lip ratio, his lower lip to upper lip ratio is completely off. He does have very, very thin lips. You do not want to have extremely thin lips just for a man and for a woman. But his upper lip is like extremely small, and his lower lip is even smaller. So you don't want your lower lip to be smaller than your upper lip. You want your lower lip to be bigger than your upper lip. And yeah, this is a complete flaw right here. His deviation from his ispalato-alar angle and his jaw frontal angle. So this is what I was talking about before, and this is a huge flaw. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. 23 degrees is a big difference between his mid-face angle and his jaw frontal angle. And like I said again, if it deviates more than 15 degrees, it's gonna be a flaw. And his deviates way past 15 degrees, so this is a complete flaw. His eyebrow tilt, so how tilted is his eyebrows? His is at -3.5. -3.5 is another flaw again, and these flaws add up a lot, so you don't want to get too many flaws like this. And preferably you want to at least have neutral eyebrows or a little bit of a tilt for a man, but he has negative tilt, so negative tilt is gonna make his face appear sad, or droopy, I guess you could say. His bitemporal width, so how wide or how much forehead exposure does he have relative to his cheekbones, and his is at 91%. 91% is ideal. It's at the higher end, but it's still ideal, so he does. All right, so his lower third proportions is 29%, and this is close to the ideal range. like I said before, anything above 3%, away from 33%, is going to be within the ideal range, and anything outside of that 3% is going to be outside of the ideal range. So his is outside of the ideal range by 1%. So this is going to be still near to ideal, but preferably you want to be at least 30%. And this is not too bad though. His lower third isn't bad at all. His ipsilateral iliac angle, the actual angle going from the subnasal all the way to the edges of his eyes, is 103 degrees. 103 degrees means that his eyes are wide set. So having a wide set eyes is not ideal at all. So yeah, this is going to be a slight flaw for him. His gonial angle is 122 degrees. 122 degrees is perfectly fine for a male. Males tend to have sharper jaw angles, and his is perfectly fine. His nasofrontal angle, so this measures how protrusive is your brow region, and this is also a masculinizing trait. His is 115 degrees. 115 degrees is a tier 1, so that is perfect. His mandibular plane angle is a tier 1 at 18 degrees, so his mandible or his jaw isn't downswung, so that is perfectly fine. So that's probably one of the reasons why his gonial angle is perfect as well. So your mandibular plane angle also factors into whether your gonial angle is going to be sharp enough. So those two things, these measurements kind of like add on to each other. The ramus to mandible ratio. Now his ramus to mandible ratio isn't bad. The only problem is his ramus is a little bit too long. So if you have a long ramus, it can be considered a macromegaly. Or I have trouble saying it sometimes, but you don't want to have a ramus that's way too long. It's gonna look unproportional, and it's gonna look over masculinizing and too overdeveloped. You want it to have a nice little balance. So his ramus, and it's this back part right here, is a little bit too long. So if he did have a shorter ramus, this would have been ideal. His facial convexity from the glabella is 159 degrees. 159 degrees means that his facial convexity is too rounded, and having a rounded facial convexity is perfectly fine, but this is just way too rounded. And this is the maxilla that I'm talking about. So this upper part, going from, I guess you can say, the eyes all the way down to the subnasal, this is the maxilla. And his maxilla is just overly protrusive. So yeah, if you have an overly protrusive maxilla, it will affect your facial convexity. His submental cervical angle is 123 degrees. 123 degrees is perfectly fine, but is it ideal? No, it's not ideal. It's not even close to the ideal. But I've seen people with submental cervical angles with this measurement or even more. And what I would say is, if he loses body fat, it will help. But he also does have a high hyoid. So that's one of the main reasons why it's like this, is because he has a high hyoid and he also has loose skin underneath. So that's one of the two reasons why. So having a high hyoid and having loose skin is going to be factors into why this is obtuse. His nasophacial angle is 37 degrees. 37 degrees isn't too bad. It's very close to the ideal range at between 30 to 36 degrees. So and this measures the relationship between the chin and nose. His chin and nose relationship isn't that bad, but it's very, very close to the ideal range. So this is technically not a flaw at all. His nasal labial angle, I know you can barely see it right here. It measures whether the nose is downswung or upturned. His nose is more on the downswung side, and having a downswung nose is not considered appealing to other people. So but his is not too downswung by any means, but it's still going to be a slight flaw at 86 degrees. And yeah, his orbital vector is a tier 3, and he does have a neutral orbital vector, so he doesn't have eyes that protrude forwardly out, or his eyes are not deep within the socket, and his eyes doesn't protrude. It's like in the middle. So if it's in the middle, that's in the normal range, but anything past that is going to be negative, and you do not want to have a negative eye orbital vector or make your eyes look buggy. His total facial convexity also includes the nose or the nasal protrusion, And like I said again, his facial convexity is just too round at 131 degrees, so this is not ideal. I'm gonna just speed through this real quick. His mental labial angle, so it measures the indent in between the creases between the chin and the bottom lip and hits at 98 degrees. 98 degrees means that his chin is just a little bit too protrusive, so that is a slight flaw, so that's not ideal. His facial convexity from the nasion, so this is the same facial convexity, is only going to the nasion, so it's another way of measuring facial convexity, and his is at 156, so that is too rounded, so that's a slight flaw. His nasal projection, so how projected is his nose? His is at 0.62 or 62% of his nasal bridge, and this is ideal, so he does have a very well projected nose. Now, how lengthy is his nose, or how long is the nose relative to the face? And this is the nasal width to height projection, and his is at 0.89. This is a tier 2, so it is going to be slightly off of the ideal range, ever so slightly, but it's very close to it. Now, these are lip measurements. So Rickett E line goes from the nasal tip down to the chin, and preferably you want the upper lip to be 4 millimeters behind and the lower lip to be 2 millimeters behind, and that's exactly what you see. The bottom lip is actually closer to the line than the upper lip, so that's why it's a tier 1. The H line goes from the tip of the upper lip down to the chin, and the bottom lip should touch, which it does, so that's a tier 1 as well, so that's perfect. The S line is a tier 2, so it goes from the middle of the nose all the way down to the chin, and the upper lip and bottom lip is supposed to touch the line, and it barely grazes it. It's not really touching that line, so I gave it like a tier 2. This is not technically a flaw, but it's very, very close, but I had to give it a tier 2 because it's a little bit more space. So if his lips were a bit more protrusive, this would have been a tier 1. And the bursal line goes from the subnasal down to the chin, and the upper lip and bottom lip is supposed to pass the line, which it does barely. Like I said again, his lips is not that protrusive, but the upper lip is more than the bottom lip, or is more protrusive than the bottom lip, so that's why I gave it a tier 1. The nasal mental angle is a tier 2 at 122 degrees, and like I said again, his facial convexity is more rounded, so that's why this is another measurement to see if your nose and chin have a good relationship, and it also takes into your facial convexity as well, not just within the nose and chin, but also the facial convexity as well. So that's why this is kind of slightly off of the ideal range. His gonial to mouth relationship, so this is the gonial bone right here, and it's usually at the bottom of the jaw or bottom of the ramus, and you want that to be underneath the lip line, and that determines if you have an adequate sized jaw for your face, which he does have an adequate sized jaw for his face. Recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle, you do not want to have any jaw recession, and he does not have any jaw recession. It barely passes the nasion, which is right here, and you preferably want to pass the glabella, which it actually meets up to his glabella barely. But yeah, this is perfectly fine. So he does not have any chin recession. Browish inclination is perfect at 21 degrees, and 21 degrees is perfectly fine, and that is very masculinizing. So he does have a lot of browish inclination. And this is the last measurement for today, is the nasal tip, and his is at 121 degrees. Now, it does look like he doesn't really have a sharp nasal tip, but he actually does, believe it or not. It's just because his nose is more on the downswing side, so that's why it doesn't look like that. And his nasal tip is perfectly fine at 121 degrees. All right, so remember, I'm gonna put my email down in the description and my IG down in the description. If you want to DM me, make sure to DM me. I will do any facial ratings for anybody who wants to DM me, and within 24 to 48 hours, you should get your face rating. So yeah, I'm out. Peace.